What is going on, everybody? For those who don't know, I go by BLSG, and this is another Eagles game preview. If you guys are new to this channel and love talking Philly sports nearly every single day, go down below and hit the subscribe button, smash the like button, make sure to turn on the notification bell so you guys are instantly notified whenever I up a new video. Now, before we get into the topic today, I have two things to say, and number one is that tomorrow on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, the Philadelphia Eagles take on the Washington Commanders. And the second thing that I wanted to say is that I apologize for not having the first two game previews like this, but I wasn't feeling well the first 2 weeks between the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings. I was not feeling well. I was down with like a cold, but I am back now doing previews like this, and we're going to get right into it. So, like I said before, the Eagles take on the Washington Commanders tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And before we get into keys to winning the game, Standout Eagles, Breakout Eagles, a hot take, and a score prediction, we are going to go over some stats here before we get to the normal things that we do on the channel. So, in terms of the offensive stats per game, in terms of yards per game, the Eagles have the best scoring offense in the league with a 477.5 yards per game, which is the best in the NFL. And then Washington has the fifth best team in terms of yards per game with 411.5 yards per game, which is fifth in the NFL. So both teams coming in top five teams in terms of yards per game. Now, in terms of passing yards, the Philadelphia Eagles have the second best team when it comes to passing yards per game with Jalen Hurts. Eagles are averaging 281 yards passing with Jalen Hurts. And then Carson Wentz for the Washington Commanders is averaging 306.5 passing yards per game when it comes to Carson Wentz. Now for rushing yards. For the Eagles, in terms of rushing yards, the Eagles are the second best team when it comes to running the ball with 189.5 rushing yards, which, like I said before, is the second best in the National Football League. The Washington Commanders are 25th in the NFL when it comes to rushing yards per game with just 86.5. The Philadelphia Eagles, in terms of points per game, are 4th in the NFL with 31 points per game. The Washington Commanders are 8th in the NFL when it comes to points per game with 27.5. Now, when it comes to third down percentage for the offensive side, the Philadelphia Eagles are second in third down percentage with a 56.7 third down percentage. And then the Washington Commanders are third in the NFL when it comes to third down percentage with 56% on third down. Now we look at the defensive stats here. As for the defensive stats, yards allowed per game, the Philadelphia Eagles are 15th in yards allowed per game with their defense at 339.5. The Washington Commanders are the 5th worst team when it comes to yards per game with 422.5. So let's hope and look for that offense to take an advantage. Now, in terms of passing yards per game allowed, the Philadelphia Eagles only allowed 203.5 passing yards per game when it comes to the ball going in the air. And then the Washington Commanders allowed 247 passing yards per game, which is 21st in the NFL. Now, in terms of rushing yards, the Philadelphia Eagles, in terms of the run defense, are ranked 20th in the NFL with 121.5. And for the Washington Commanders, they are ranked 28th in the NFL with their rush defense at 157 yards allowed per game on the ground. Now, in terms of points per game allowed, the Philadelphia Eagles have averaged 21 points allowed per game, which is 13th in the NFL. And then the Washington Commanders have allowed 29 points per game in terms of their defense, which is the 27th best in the National Football League. Now, in terms of third downs being allowed by the defense, the Philadelphia Eagles are tied for 27th in terms of allowing third downs at 50%. And then for the Washington Commanders, they are tied for 4th with a 28% third down percentage allowed when it comes to their defense. So those are some statistics right there to give you guys a little bit more on what we're kind of seeing out of this matchup and what it's going to look like in each of the categories. Now let's get right into it with my 3 keys for us to winning this game. Alright guys, so my 3 keys for us to win this game. My number 1 key for us to win this game is to run the ball. Yes, like I said before, the Washington Commanders have the 5th worst run defense in the NFL when it comes to rushing yards. They have the 28th worst, or the 5th worst run defense in the National Football League at 28th, allowing 157 rushing yards a game. So, and also Sanders has also been running the ball very well when he is on the ground running the ball, and everyone else can get in the game too and be a factor as well, such as Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell. And I think this is definitely something the Eagles need to take advantage of, also with Jalen Hurts' legs. But don't give Jalen Hurts like 17 carries like what we saw in Week 1 against the Lions. Just give him like close to under 10 carries at least. And then let Sanders, Scott, Gainwell, let those guys do all the work. But at the end of the day, this is definitely something that the Eagles definitely need to take advantage of. Is Washington's the run defense rather. And this is definitely something the Philadelphia Eagles definitely need to take advantage of, in my opinion. And if they can slow down Washington's run defense, especially with the injury factor coming into play, the Eagles can definitely run all over Washington's defense and definitely have a good chance of starting out 3-0. My number 2 key for us to winning this game is planning up a good defensive scheme set if you are Jonathan Gannon. Yes, like we saw last week, the Philadelphia Eagles only allowed, I think it was just 7 points or 10 points, something like that. But they held the Vikings. They were locking them up. Darius Slay was locking Justin Jefferson in solitary confinement. He was locking him up in purgatory. Dalvin Cook was getting held up by the Eagles defense. And that is a good scheme set because that is what Jonathan Gannon is doing with these players. He's planning up a good scheme set for the defensive scheme and for the players. And he's also making sure the players go out there and execute, which is what Jonathan Gannon has pretty much done this entire time for the Philadelphia Eagles and in terms of this defense as a whole. So Jonathan Gannon, we need another big game on the defensive side of things. And I think if you find a way to come out with your run defense like that, and with your pass defense like that, then you definitely can come out here and make some noise to the Washington Commanders. And then my number 3 key for us to winning this game is to play with aggressiveness and play angry. Yes, the Philadelphia Eagles, they need to come out here and play with some meaning. They need to come out here and play with toughness, intensity, whatever word in the dictionary you need to describe what the Philadelphia Eagles defense as a whole, and especially with the offensive side of things as well, that can definitely come into play. Jalen Hurts plays with meaning. Miles Sanders plays with meaning. The receivers, they play with meaning. The offensive line plays with meaning. The whole defense, they play with meaning. Special teams play with meaning. They want to win. They want it more. They wanted it more, and how do you think they won the first 2 weeks? They wanted the wins more than their opponents. So I need to say the same thing this week, and I think if we are determined, if we are a scrappy team, if we're determined enough to go out here and win these types of games, let's go out there and show Week 3 and show the Washington Commanders what this Philadelphia Eagles team and franchise can do in Week 3 to them to find a way to start out 3-0. With all that being said, let's get into my 2 standout Eagles. Alright guys, so my 2 standout Eagles for this game. My number 1 standout Eagle for this game, if you guys can see this right here, I'm turning my head back so you guys can see, is Jalen Hurts right there in the middle. Yes, I think if Jalen Hurts, he's finding a way to go through the progressions. He's worked hard in the offseason, and he's worked hard in the start of the season as well. Even though there's been points that he's been a little bit inaccurate rather, and there's been some times where he has made not some great plays in terms of like the incompletions and things like that. But if Jalen Hurts can find a way to lead this team, because he is a leader in this locker room, and if he can go out there and execute, then that is just going to be a big time factor here in this game for the Philadelphia Eagles. My number 2 standout Eagle for this game, I'm going to go with Miles Sanders, because I think Miles Sanders, the way he's run the ball through the first 2 weeks, here's a stat for you guys. 30 carries for Miles Sanders on the ground, 176 yards rushing for Miles Sanders, which is almost 6 yards a carry, and then his one touchdown that he had, his one rushing touchdown that he had, I think, what was in week 1. But I think Miles Sanders, in terms of the running game, can definitely put up some numbers for the Eagles. And I think Miles Sanders definitely has a big chance to have a big game, especially since he is our RB1. And I definitely think if Miles Sanders can get by our offensive line, as long as our offensive line holds it down. But if he can get by our offensive line and then start running into Washington's secondary, this guy can be dangerous in the NFL at some point this season. With all that being said, let's get into my breakout Eagle. Alright guys, so my breakout Eagle for this game. If Jonathan Gannon uses this player right, he will definitely be a breakout player in this game. And my breakout player for this game, if you guys can see right here, my breakout player for this game, if Jonathan Gannon uses him right in terms of the defensive scheme and the scheme fit, I'm going with Jordan Davis for my breakout Eagle for this game for the Philadelphia Eagles. I just think that Jordan Davis has something to prove. And with this offensive line of Washington depleted after losing Brandon Shervin, the fact that they have 2 more injuries to their offensive line, I think this is a game where especially guys like Jordan Davis definitely need to take advantage. And I think Jordan Davis can find a way to take advantage in this game. And if he can put pressure to Carson Wentz and take over this against this offensive line, I know he's young, I know he's a rookie, but Washington's offensive line is already depleted after losing Brandon Scherf and then losing 2 of your starting offensive linemen. And I think this could be a game where Jordan Davis definitely takes advantage. I know anyone can take advantage for this team. I know Fletcher Cox could. I know Brandon Graham could. I know Javon Hargrave could. I know Josh Sweat could. But I'm going to go with the backup here saying Jordan Davis definitely has a big game for the Philadelphia Eagles and definitely has a breakout game depending on how Jonathan Gannon uses him and how much time Jordan Davis will get to play on the football field when it's game time. With all that being said, let's get into my hot take. Alright guys, so my hot take for this game, this is probably a hot take that the Philadelphia Eagles have yet to show this entire season, but my hot take for this game is that the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line allows 0 sacks on Jalen Hurts tomorrow afternoon. As yes, I think this offensive line, after allowing sacks the first 2 games, and the fact that Jalen Hurts is very mobile and can scramble out of the pocket, I think this offensive line shows up, plays with the meaning, the mentality, the mindset. I think they play with heart in this game to help out Jalen Hurts and make sure Jalen Hurts does not get sacked. I know Montez Sweat is still on the D-line. I know Jonathan Allen is still on the D-line on top of that. But when it comes down to it, I think this offensive line needs to show up, especially for Jordan Mailata on his side, depending if Chase Young would be over there, but Jordan Mailata is not going to have to deal with Chase Young. So that is something that Jordan Mailata should be like, thank God about, because I think Chase Young is obviously a great player. Obviously, he was a great player at Ohio State, my favorite college team. But I think this offensive line plays with heart, plays with meaning, and they play with dog mentality, and they show Washington's D-line what this team can do. And I think they find a way to show up in this game and absolutely smother the Washington Commanders' defensive line, especially on blitzes too. But at the end of the day, I have the Eagles allowing 0 sacks on Jalen Hurts, and I definitely think is something that we can definitely see happening, even though the Eagles' offensive line has allowed sacks in both games so far this season. With all that being said, let's get into what you guys have been waiting for, and that is my score prediction. Alright guys, so my score prediction for this game, this is going to be a solid score prediction. The 2 former the current Eagles quarterback, Jalen Hurts, going against the former Eagles quarterback in Carson Wentz. So the 2 Eagles quarterbacks, 1 current, 1 former, going head to head in Washington. And my final score for this game, I have the Eagles beating the Washington Commanders by 10, 27-17. Also, the reason why I go with that as my final score is because that has been a very common final score in the last few years, that the Eagles and the Commanders have met up, whether if it was when they were called the you-know-whats or when they were called the Washington football team. Now they're called the Commanders. But I think this is definitely something that I can see as a final score. The Philadelphia Eagles defeating the Commanders 27-17. I really do think the Eagles come out red hot. I think Sirianni gets these guys all fired up in the locker room. I think he tells them to play with heart, the mentality, the dog mentality. And I think Jalen Hurts will come out and have a big game. And like I said before, everybody must go out there and do their job, and they all must execute, if I haven't said that so far in the video. But everyone must go out there and execute. The offense, the defense, and the special teams. They all need to go out there and execute, and I think they do in this game. And I think the Eagles will find a way to beat the Washington Commanders 27-17 in the Eagles' first matchup against one of the division rivals in the NFC East. You guys give your thoughts down below in the comments section. How do you guys feel about this matchup? What do you guys think of this game? Give me your 3 keys to winning, your standout Eagles, your breakout Eagle, your hot take, and your score prediction. Throw them all down in the comments below. Want to see what you guys think, and let's go Birds, man. Anyway, guys, see you next time. Peace out, fly, Eagles fly, and let's go Birds!